Hello and good evening. This is Ernesto Burden. I am the publisher of New Hampshire Magazine and Parenting New Hampshire. And I am very pleased to welcome you to our webinar this evening, Cultivating Grit and Resilience in Children. This topic has never seemed more relevant. And to have it brought to us by the Derryfield School tonight seems incredibly apropos. For 55 years, Derryfield has thrived by being a nimble, forward-thinking school focused on the holistic growth of curious, engaged students who graduate ready to succeed at the finest colleges and universities. And in the face of COVID-19, these qualities have only helped the school thrive and to imagine and plan for, then execute a learning model that Derryfield parents and students rate as highly satisfactory. Now, what do we actually mean by grit and resilience, and what can you do to help your child become strong, independent adults? Our panel tonight is going to help you understand that and provide some key takeaways, including what we should and should not be doing as parents to cultivate grit and resilience, to understand why focusing on the inputs, not the outcomes, will help set your child up with a growth mindset, and hear why grit and resilience are so important for college success. Our speakers tonight are Mary Halpin Carter, who has served as the head of the Derryfield School since 2013. Her focus and passion is the intentional development of human potential. She created the Pathways program used at Derryfield to help students identify their strengths and interests and chart a course for their academic and personal development. Mark Blaisdell has spent the past 17 years of his career as a history teacher and then the head of the middle school at Derryfield. He recently earned a master's degree in teaching and learning at Northeastern University's College of Advanced Studies, an online learning program, as a way to give focus to his lifelong commitment to professional development, and because he was intrigued by the revolution taking place in higher education. And Brennan Barnard is the Director of College Counseling and Outreach at the Derryfield School and at US Performance Academy, an online independent high school for elite athletes. He is also the College Admissions Program Advisor with the Making Caring Common project at Harvard Graduate School of Education. And with that, I'd like to begin with Mark, who is going to lead us off today. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Ernesto. Thanks for having us. Delighted to be here. I'm going to just share my screen. We've got a little presentation for you to show. And if I get a thumbs up from somebody that you can all see this. Awesome. Okay. So just a little bit about us. Maybe you're thinking, what kind of gives us the ability or maybe the hubris to think we could talk a little bit about grit to you tonight. I will say that we do have an advantage, I think, as educators in seeing so many kids, tens of thousands, literally throughout the years. We've also studied it extensively, but maybe most important, all three of us are parents. And two of us in particular have adult children already, and one of us, though you can't tell from looking, is actually a grandfather. It's I won't tell you because obviously we all look way too young for that to happen. As Ernesto said, I think there's a lot of terminology. As educators, we want to make sure we get terminology matters to us. So there's two terms that we'll be using tonight, kind of interchangeably, but I think it's important to make a distinction. First of all, what is grit? And we will be using Angela Duckworth's work and actually her words in terms of a definition. Grit is, she describes as the sustained application of effort towards a long-term goal. So one way we like to talk about grit, both as a faculty and also with our students, is it's something you can see and observe. We've all seen examples of grit. We kind of know what it looks like. We probably have our own memory of when we may have been gritty at some point. And then resilience is really a student's capacity to function effectively despite encountered difficulties or stressors. So resilience is the capacity built within a student. So really, when we're talking about what we're trying to build, is really that capacity, that resilience. But grit is just such a great word that you'll see that come popping up again and again. So I mentioned Angela Duckworth. She is certainly the pioneer within the grit movement. Her work is fascinating. We're going to share with you now just a quick video that will give you a thumbnail sketch of somebody's interpretation of her book, Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, which is, I would say, a must starting point.
I recently read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. Angela's a psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania, and she's obsessed with finding out the answer to the question, who's successful and why? She's conducted studies involving national spelling bee champions, elite military training graduates, and top corporate salespeople to determine what was the biggest predictor of their success. She wondered, was it talent or was it effort? Now, our society would have us believe that it would be talent. We have the tendency to marvel at natural talent and overlook the importance of effort. Surveys show that we commend people who put in the effort, but we don't actually believe it can compete with natural talent. We often discount our own abilities when going up against people who have a higher IQ or appear more naturally gifted. But Angela has found the following to be true in study after study. Where talent counts once, effort counts twice. Angela explains this using a simple formula. Talent times effort equals skill, and skill times effort equals achievement. When you apply effort to any base level talent, you get skill. When you apply effort to skill, you get achievement. The science shows that grit, the sustained application of effort towards a long-term goal, is the biggest predictor of lifelong achievement. For some, it's an inconvenient truth. Certain people like to see natural talent and use it as an excuse as to why they would never achieve what those people can, and don't even bother trying in the first place. But for others, it can be liberating, knowing that they're not doomed to mediocrity due to a lack of talent. If they put in the effort, they can achieve great things. Sure, there are some limitations. All of us can't make the NBA. We're not all 6'9". But you could become one of the best players in your local basketball league. By remembering that talent counts once, effort counts twice, we can be hopeful that we can one day become more than we think we can, that we can achieve great things despite not winning the talent lottery. But being gritty is hard. Resisting endless temptations to quit or experiencing failure is extremely difficult to deal with. But Angela says we all have the ability to grow our grit if we direct our focus in 4 specific ways. First, develop a fascination with what you're trying to do. Second, strive to improve each day. Third, remind yourself of the greater purpose. And fourth, adopt a growth mindset. I recently read the book Grit by Angela.
All right, so we're going to stop there, and where we're going to start with this, because we really believe, have come to believe, that the most important starting place, and let me get to the next slide, that the most important starting place is this idea of a growth mindset. And, you know, you've probably heard talk about a growth mindset before. And, you know, the reason why it has to be a starting point is that what a growth mindset is it's the ability to believe that you can get better at things if you work at them. And if you think of it, without a growth mindset or what's called a fixed mindset, it's hard to be motivated or to have effort if you think what you're going to do doesn't make a difference. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about what we've narrowed down to our top 7. Dr. Carter and I are going to talk about our top 7 sort of hopefully helpful advice on how we can build grit or build resiliency. And the first one is this notion that as adults, we really have to stop controlling and start coaching. And we really believe more and more that coaches give us a great model for how to develop grit. Coaches help kids develop skills, but they never play the game. Think about that. They never play the game themselves. Our job as adults is to support each child so she can flourish and develop. one way I always talk about this, and I think parents will feel this as well. Though a coach may help their athletes develop a skill, they never would ever think about taking their place when things are on the line, because they know that going through that experience is what's going to make their team and their individuals tougher. I've talked about this with parents who sometimes we're going to talk about rescuing kids from tough situations. And can you imagine a good coach when a child ends up, say, on the free throw line to win a game, to decide, well, you know what? I don't want them to experience this. I'm worried about the outcome. I can see that they're super nervous. I think I'm going to run out on the floor and take that shot myself. So really, when you think about that, what the great coach does, I think, is provide an excellent example of the type of work we need to do with our kids.
So the next element is remembering that perfection is not the goal. In fact, perfection is the enemy of creativity and risk-taking ability. And so we've got to really dampen down expectations about the outcome, competition for the best outcome at the beginning, because you've got to develop in children this willingness to be a beginner. We all, envy adults who are willing to take up golf or take up painting or something that they've never tried before. They're willing to be patient with themselves as they incrementally grow in their skills. And that's really how everybody starts at something. But if there's too much expectation and pressure around a perfect outcome, you can actually really derail really able kids. The kids who we've seen who develop a test phobia, for example, are kids almost all the time. Their expectations for their work is so high that they can't get themselves started on it. So what might this look like if you're a parent? Well, say your child is doing an American history unit and they're building a frontier cabin model, and you're excited because you're like me and you love US history and you love thinking about frontier life. And that cabin is looking more like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? That this child is working at. Well, we've got to silence our own emphasis toward outcome and perfection, and we've got to instead ask that child more about what went well. Is this how did your plan go? What might you do the same next time you have a project like this? What might you do differently? What do you feel proud of about your frontier cabin? So Mark, perfectionism.
Yeah,
No.
I agree, Mary. And I think one of the ways that many of us have experienced this, especially in elementary school, I've had many conversations of, you show up for a project presentation night and you're trying to be good and know that perfection isn't the goal, and your child's tower's leaning, and you show up and it is clear from the work of some of these first and second graders that their parents clearly help them out. And where that can be a tough thing, I just think we have to resist that temptation. Those messages that you send when you do work to kids is just absolutely the opposite of the messages you want to send for them to be able to build grit by focusing on the perfect project that, honey, you almost got there. I will take it the rest of the way so that it looks perfect. Really have to resist that.
So you want to help kids build confidence by tackling manageable challenges. This to me is the most important of our pieces of advice. When I think about how I have seen highly capable young adults develop over time, it's by this challenge, that challenge, that challenge. Because what we're really trying to build inside that child's inner narrative is, I have the skills to try this. I can figure this out. I will find a way. That, I love that expression when kids say out loud, I will find a way. I can find a way. That's like the grittiest attitude there is when you think about it, right? That's who you want guiding you through the, being lost in the caverns underground as someone who says, I will find a way. Don't worry that we've lost all our matches and our blankets and our map. I will find a way. So how do you help develop a child who believes this about themselves? Well, the way is that you help them develop a track record of successes and experience in reflecting on that track record so that they see in themselves competence, capacity, capability. So an example is you have a child, the first time they audition for a play, celebrate that, the trying out, not the getting of the part, because that would be the outcome, right? Celebrate the trying, the willingness to be a beginner, the willingness to develop that skill. The first time, or when they do class presentations, those are manageable challenges that are coached. And those are incredibly important to be building all kinds of strengths around project management, around public speaking confidence, around working with others. The first time they do other things outside of school, arrange a party for a friend by themselves. The first time they go to summer camp, that is a leap. The first time they sleep over at someone's house who's not a family member, all of those are challenges that they tackle, and then they move up. We actually have designed our curriculum, and this is actually a picture of students working in our middle school class that is around project-based learning, because each of those are student-centered, active kinds of challenges that develop skills and at the same time develop problem solving and really capability. So Mark?
Yeah, I agree.
Those little challenges.
Yeah, and I think sometimes our work as adults is because they are kids and they're not developmentally quite ready to recognize all the little steps it might take to get someplace. Sometimes they can think a little too big, so they'll take on a challenge that we recognize, like, look, you kind of have to learn to walk before you learn to ski jump. So part of that, I think, is helping them with manageable challenges, so they don't think because I couldn't do X, a super complex task, I can't do any of this. So part of it is our work as adults is to help them to make these challenges manageable, sort of within their reach to agree, but not without some real work. So another thing is, this is always a tough question. We deal with this all the time with our parents. This notion of, in terms of the challenge that I was just talking about, we don't want to set our children up for failure, but we don't want to save them either. This is where offering the structure around to succeed is really important. But again, as we said earlier, not stepping in to make sure that they do. There are times when, as parents and as educators, it's like, you feel that, should I step in and save them? Or should I let them take the consequence on? And, there's no steady, hard, fast solution. I think you have to, that's where when we know our kids and we know what they're capable of, you have to make those decisions along the way. I will say that I think if you err, I do not believe, and I've come really to believe this really strongly, that it's easier for us to rescue as parents, possibly, than it is to let that child fail. And what we have found time after time is the messages that you send when you save, which can sometimes look like, all right, this long-term project, I know you didn't work on it, and you put it all together and it's not ready. And now you've developed that cough and you don't want to go to school, and you're promising to me that you're going to work on this today. That's that opportunity for a save. And I think what we found, and research shows, when you do that save, you're sending the absolute wrong message, which children will pick up pretty quick, that they aren't capable of doing the work, and that if they get the next time around, instead of learning a lesson, they're actually just going to wait for the next bailout.
Mark, I have a story to share with you about good parenting through poor student performance. When I was in fourth grade, I was in my class, assignment was that we were working over a long period of time, it seemed, to do reports on states. Well, I left my report on the state of Connecticut, which is a fascinating analytical topic, I might add, till the last minute, and produced a not surprisingly poor paper. And I remember being in the parent conference with my parents and my teacher, and they saw this paper, and they had known that I had left it till the last minute and that I was doing it really slapdash fast. And after the parent conference, my dad said, how did that feel? How did it feel to do that paper that way? And I said, it felt terrible. I knew I could have done so much more. And I saw what a good job some of my friends had done. And he said, so I have every confidence in you that the next time you will put more time into it. He sent me a lot of messages in that answer. The most important maybe is, it's my work. It's my job. It's my pride. It's my pride of self and career. And then also, like, yeah, spend more time. Well, I didn't ever want to have that feeling again. And I haven't.
I think that's a great story. And I would just add on the setting them up for failure. I think one of the tendencies, of this generation, frankly, is one thing we have to be careful about is how much we schedule our kids. And there's a phenomenon that definitely happens when you have a high achiever that seems like they can do a lot just to keep piling it on. But there's a real danger there where we can set our kids up for failure by overscheduling them.
And you can also set them up for the temptation of academic dishonesty because they feel they have to deliver the grade. They don't have the time. And then they try to take a shortcut that is plagiarism or the like, for sure. So building grit is focusing also on effort and not results. It's about how we know that it's hard work. It's hard work that develops skills. I always say to students, writing is one of the most painful skills you'll ever develop. It takes so much effort over time to become a strong writer, but it's obviously essential at working on. Athletics is a great teacher about this. So is learning to play an instrument too. My girls played for a fabulous Derryfield coach, Lenny McCaig, played field hockey. And Lenny, who was from Northern Ireland, would say to them, control the controllables, which they still recite using his Northern Irish accent all the time. And he would say, think about executing your plays, not the score. The score will take care of itself. Talk about wisdom to apply to your whole life. And so what does that seem like for a parent? Well, it means that you celebrate the effort, the input, the time the child spent practicing, the time that the child's reading for pleasure, reading outside of school, doing extra math problems rather, and you celebrate gradual improvement and steady effort. If those are what we celebrate and we reward, we are developing for sure gritty people.
Great. And number 6 out of 7, so we're almost through, is the notion to not be afraid of your child's feelings. And this can be really challenging as adults when we see some things that unfortunately we characterize as negative emotions like frustration. I think of there's a math teacher within the middle school at Derryfield who always asks questions at the end of the class. Did any of this material frustrate anybody today? With this notion that great. She uses this phrase brain pain, in that if you're not feeling a little bit of brain pain and some frustration, then I'm not doing my job in challenging you. So I think it's really important that you want to acknowledge, certainly you want to show empathy that, wow, this is a really tough assignment. I can understand why you're frustrated, because it takes a lot of attention to detail, but it's really important to move adolescents who do think very first. Again, all you parents know this, their emotional centers are typically way ahead of their judgment centers and their long-term planning centers. So to help them beyond those emotions, acknowledge them, but also say, of course, you know, working through frustration means that you are doing challenging work, and you're going to appreciate it even more later.
Absolutely. I think also encouraging your kids to do hard things is really valuable. My daughter Polly, when she was in 7th grade, saw ski jumping on the Olympics, and she asked if she could learn to ski jump, and it was a little scary, as you can imagine, as a parent. But I silenced that in myself, because I wanted to raise a brave girl. And the incredible sense of satisfaction and confidence that spread in every area of her life, because she was able to start as a beginner and build up in a sport that lots of people are afraid of or find too hard to even imagine doing, spread to all aspects of her life. She'd say it out loud, I can do sleepaway camp because I can ski jump, and a lot of people are afraid to do that. So doing and then reflecting on that brave doing makes for braver behavior. So this last one I love, because affirming your child's ability to impact the world is incredibly intrinsically motivating too. So what is more motivating than to see that you have agency to improve life for another person, or to improve something in the world? Again, why do we believe so much in project-based learning and real life challenges in curriculum? For this very reason. An example of this is I was observing an environmental studies course at school, and the students had been studying organic foods, and the 2 executives from Pete and Jerry's Egg Company came to class, and in groups, in teams of about 6 kids, the students presented their proposed marketing plans, solution, communication plans for the company to solve the company's problem that was posed to them. And the problem that those executives posed to the kids 4 weeks before was, we produce organic eggs that adhere to very high standards, much higher than generic organic eggs, but it's very hard for us to get the consumer to see the difference. Can you, with your new knowledge of science and the way food is produced, can you help us? And so those kids, you can imagine, they told me they put way more hours in than than were required, because they were so committed to this real life challenge that was really going to impact, they felt, the environment. Similarly, if you have a child who's got a babysitting job, potentially with a special needs cousin, and they see the effect that their presence has on that cousin's development and growth, that's incredibly grit producing. You can get through a lot of hard days of babysitting if you believe what you do makes a difference to someone else. And we've definitely seen it at Derryfield with students who volunteer to work on the Special Olympics competition in February and March. Those are long, cold days outside at ski races and all skating and all kinds of competitions. But the joy that they bring to these dedicated athletes in Special Olympics is really transformative to many kids, builds their sense of all the things they can do. Even if it's hard to do them, they're worth it. So I think it's time for us to pass the baton to our friend Brennan to talk about the relationship between grit and college admission.
Great, thanks, Mary. So why does this all matter? And it's the secret is not just college admission, but it's all related, right? I have been doing college admission work for over 20 years, and it has been the reason I do this work is because it is this incredible opportunity as a rite of passage moment, and it is one that requires resilience and grit, the college admission experience, but it also matters to colleges, and increasingly so. And when we think about these character attributes like grit and why they matter in admission, we're talking about, what does it mean to be human, right? What does it mean to be part of a community? And why does resilience matter? And part of the work, and I'll talk about it in a minute, that we've done at Making Caring Common at Harvard Graduate School of Education, has been around working with college admissions officers to define these character attributes like grit, and then look at how they can be assessed in students in the admission experience, in the application process. And so so part of it is looking the importance of character is because we are facing, and all the research shows this, is that we are facing a pretty significant empathy deficit in our world and in our nation. And so it is important to colleges and universities that they focus on character as they review applicants, because their campus climate is really important. They are looking at how do students interact with each other, and how do students learn, and how do they create a community where they can be supportive, and where they can take risks, and where they can stumble, and you'll see it at the bottom here, and how can they bounce forward rather than bounce back? How can they bounce forward? And Arianna Huffington talks a lot about this, as does, there's a book by Michaela Haas called Bouncing Forward. And, how do we turn these moments of challenge into opportunities? As you look at college and university graduation and retention rates, the national average for college for 4-year graduation is hovers right around 50%. So, I mean, that's a huge issue for colleges. And by the way, their ratings, by commercial ratings, rankings like U.S. News and World Report, they partly base those rankings on how well they do at retention, and how they do with 4- and 6-year graduation rates. So these are just super important issues, and again, college admission shouldn't be the goal in building resilient children, but it certainly makes a difference, and colleges are looking at this. And the next slide is just a report that came out now, not last March, but the March before, about how parents and schools can cultivate these pieces of ethical character and reduce achievement pressure in college admission. And this has some great resources in there for parents and for schools to look at how to build some of these ethical capacities. So I really encourage you to check that out. Mental health. Let's talk mental health for a second, and the importance of resiliency. So this is just a snapshot from 2007 to 2015 of college campus mental health counseling centers, and the types of struggles that students were presenting most often. And as you will see, depression and relationships used to be kind of up there and are declining, and levels of anxiety and depression are skyrocketing. And this speaks to the importance of students being resilient and getting to college and getting through college. So often there's this kind of push to achieve to get into college. And then students haven't taken risks, and they haven't challenged themselves in ways that give them opportunities to struggle. And parents and students have kind of packaged their experience in high school, and haven't stepped outside to kind of challenge themselves and see what they're made of, and see what can they persist. And so they get to college, and at the first significant hurdle, they really don't know what to do. And so this is just a really important reason why it's important to build throughout high school, build these pieces of resilience and grit. And then the final piece, and then we're gonna move to some questions and answer period. But this is just a sample rubric from an admission office, and it as colleges review applications, they are looking at academics, and they're looking at testing, if that's part of the equation, but they're trying to get a holistic view of a student and what they bring to the table. This is a rubric that one college uses to kind of look at these issues of character. And as you'll see on the left there, determination, grit, and passion is one. And where is that? And then resilience and can overcome adversity and adaptability is another. And so this is just to show you that colleges, and increasingly more and more colleges, are defining what these character attributes are, and they're going out looking for students that have these capacities. And the ways they're seeing these are in recommendations from teachers and counselors, in essays. At Derryfield, we work really closely with students to choose the teacher who's going to recommend them, and that's not always the teacher who they've excelled in their class all along. Sometimes the best recommendation comes from a teacher in a class where you've really struggled and you've kind of overcome something, and they can speak to that in recommendations. And those personal recommendations are really important for colleges to get a good sense of what a student brings to the table, as is the student's ability to articulate in their writing, in their essay, to articulate, when they've faced adversity, or when they've been determined, and how does that look, and that kind of self-awareness piece, which is really important to colleges. So I'm going to leave it there, and hopefully we can take some questions. Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about these resources?
Yeah, we wanted to provide you with at least a place to maybe a place to start, but or to stop somewhere in your journey to understanding grit. And obviously, Grit by Angela Duckworth is a maybe one of the first stops you should take. A book called Mindset by Carol Dweck is especially good on growth mindset. How Children Succeed by, and I'm not making this guy's last name up, by Paul Tough, as in tough, is a great book. The Gift of Failure is a more recent book by Jessica Leahy, which is a great way to look at failure in terms of how we define it pejoratively, when really it might be the best things that we can give our kids at times. And then The Yes Brain by Daniel Siegel. So those are great places to possibly start. We hope that you guys sent some questions along. I don't know I think Ernesto was looking through those. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll take any questions that you might have. Throw them in the chat there, and we'll get to them.
Thanks very much, Mark. And Mary and Brennan, that was fantastic. As a father of four, ranging from 9 to 18, there are a lot of useful things that I took away from that. So I really appreciate it. To everyone who is listening now, if you haven't popped a question in the Q&A, please feel free to do so now. It's your opportunity. But we do have some questions to start with. And I think just because we're coming right out of what you were just talking about, Brennan, a question that occurs is, what should applicants, who are people, kids looking to prepare their applications, do to build these character attributes that you think would be helpful to them? How do they build those in ways that stand out and then actually demonstrate them within that application? Like, how do they get the stories to tell?
Yeah, that's a great question. and it comes back again to this idea of taking risks and putting themselves out there and stepping outside their comfort zone, and engaging with others in ways that might not just feel natural, and being proactive about the ways they seek out opportunities, whether it's an internship or taking a class that might challenge them, and instead of kind of going and getting the easy A, taking a class that might be an honors class that is going to push them to the next level, and not being afraid of what the outcome of that might be, and learning from it and being able to talk about that. So maybe talking about that in an essay or an interview with a college. And so those are some ways to stand out. And again, in essays, great way to communicate that to colleges.
So I hear what you're saying about not worrying about the outcome so much as the effort that's going into what they're doing. But I can imagine parents out there thinking, well, I want their transcript to look incredible when it goes to a college. So how are colleges evaluating that? And are they taking that into account, that somebody's taking risks consciously?
Yeah, they are taking into account. It's kind of a yes and, right? I mean, they do want students who have demonstrated a certain level of excellence, right, in the classroom and outside the classroom. But even the most selective schools could fill their incoming class with students who have perfect testing and perfect grades and perfect everything. And that would make a really boring first year class at that school, right? So they want students who have faced adversity, and they take a student's application really in context of everything that's going on in their lives and the opportunities they've taken advantage of. So if they don't step outside and take those risks, the applicant's going to likely look pretty flat to a lot of colleges.
That makes a lot of sense. We have a question here from the audience that is one that dovetails with one I had jotted down. This, as a parent, that our questioner writes, I struggle with how far do I let my child fail? And presumably if they go too far, will this diminish his ability to build grit? And maybe Mary, I think you had talked about don't rescue, right? And so maybe we could throw that question to you. Is there a time when it is appropriate to rescue?
Well, I think it's about setting up manageable challenges. Is half of this allowing kids to? I don't know that it's fail so much as allowing kids to have sovereignty over their own work. And human beings from when they're tiny crave sovereignty. I remember being in a cafe before COVID and watching a dad reach over to a 2-year-old and to cut his cookie in half and eat half of the 2-year-old's cookie that he had picked out. And what happened, right? If you're a parent, that child was literally a chocolate mess on the floor. Like that was game over. They had to leave because his sovereignty had been violated, right? He wanted to be in control of being a big boy and sitting at that chair at that cafe and eating the cookie he picked out all by himself, right? Yeah. And I think, when we think about putting kids in situations, if it's a manageable challenge, right? If that you haven't stacked the deck, the kid isn't in level 5 swimming and he's never been in swim class before. So it's a manageable challenge, then it's okay. It's okay if it takes you all summer to swim the length of the pool, because by the time you swim the length of the pool, it'll feel like you ran a marathon. And it doesn't matter how long it took. In fact, in a way, there's almost an inverse relationship. The pride of swimming the length of that pool, that really hard thing, but that was an age appropriate challenge, will stay with you.
So it almost sounds like part of the challenge as a parent then is to, which I guess makes sense, is to always continue to set appropriate boundaries around the kids so that they can have that sovereignty within that safe sort of territory.
That's right. I do not believe in sink or swim. To use it, to keep with the swimming metaphor, I do not believe in tossing somebody in the water. All that teaches you is you cannot trust the person who tossed you in the water. But putting them in a age appropriate, leveling up, leveling up, leveling up. That's, and Mark, you've seen this so many times.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. There's the preventative medicine side that we talked about in terms of setting them, trying to set them up for success and not for failure. But at the same time, I think, where we have to be careful as adults is to not get caught up in their sense of failure. I mean, we can all remember, we share this experience with them of, as a student failing a test, which we look back at now and say, wow, the world didn't end. And I learned some valuable things from that. And I think we have to recognize that sometimes those opportunities have to happen and the world doesn't end, even though for our children, it might feel like, oh my God, they're going to be devastated. But I think when you look at the flip side that we were trying to talk about, the message you send from saving is going to have a much deeper and longer impact in many of these cases than actually letting them face the consequences. And, those consequences, I mean, short of landing in jail, I mean, I think we have to be realistic.
Definitely
Sometimes
if jail's on the table.
right. And sometimes, that does mean, look, you need to own up that you took a shortcut and maybe we're academically dishonest on something. Saving children from that, what we tend to see is, that's going to send the wrong message. And then the next time around, the consequences get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's much easier for them to learn lessons early on, even if they are going to be, significant and have an emotional response.
There's probably something good in what that child did. Like there are almost no disappointing performances that don't have something in them, if you're thinking with a growth mindset, to promote. Like, for example, if you get on stage at the talent show and you forget all the words to your song, right? But you are only, you performed and you've never performed before. You've never done that before. Then, next time you can get out on stage and you'll have worked a little longer on your words, or you'll maybe have a little set of notes to catch you in case. It's interesting. We have a alum who now works at Derryfield, who, when she was in about 8th grade, I think, went out to sing a song on stage. Oh, really? She was in 6th grade and forgot all the words to her song. And her memory is not of failure. Her memory is of her friends coming up on stage to sing it with her, to help to sing with her. Now, had her parents intervened, there would be a whole traumatic memory. But what a great memory! Like, I'm not alone. It's a totally different memory than a parent might have had with the same story.
I also think it's really important for students to hear no, right? And to face that disappointment early, because, I often sit down with students who say, well, I'm not going to apply to that college because I'm not going to get in. Well, I mean, maybe you won't get in, but maybe you will. And aim high. And I think it's, if a student gets to kind of the end of their high school experience and they apply to college, and that's the first time they've really heard a significant no, then we've let them down. So just wanted to add that.
Well, a related question, sort of along that same idea is, but maybe adding a layer of complexity here. What if there aren't great consequences to each one of these potential failures, but what if your child is racking up a string of losses, and this parent asks, how do you respond to that series of losses or setbacks where it's beginning to seem like low performance is being translated into the idea that the child is a low performer? Um,
Well, I
whoever
think
wants to take
there are
it.
lots of arenas of life, right? And one of the places that kids who are kind of down on their luck can almost always shine is service. And even in this pandemic, there is service work you can do remotely, virtually. In fact, I was just talking to a colleague who's going to be generating a list of all those opportunities for students and families to put out to our families before the winter break. So service is a great place where just by showing up, you make a difference.
Hmm.
And everybody can put cans on a shelf at the food pantry just about. And you just lifted the load of those wonderful people who are working at the food pantry, and they will tell you that. So you visiting somebody when COVID is over in a nursing home makes an immense difference, and that can lift. Mark, I definitely think of service as such a place where kids can rack up win after win.
Totally agree. And I think that's one thing that we can do. I mean, kids, will have varied degrees of success throughout their academic career. Obviously, for some kids, in the academic situation they're in, they may start to feel like they are low performers. I do think it's important for parents in those cases to work with schools to help better understand how they might support their child academically at home. But I completely agree with what Mary says, and the research backs this up. For many kids, they don't that the grit in academics for many of them comes secondarily, meaning they can go to some other place in their life where parents can talk to them about the grit that it took to, I don't know, master a skateboard trick, those sorts of things, and say, that effort that you put in there is going to make a difference in this area to some degree, and use some other parts. Service, I totally agree with Mary, is a huge one, to say, look, it's about the approach and the process, and try to build some successes in other areas, and then help kids learn to apply that in areas where they are, as you put, I think it's a good way to put it, Ernesto, feeling like they're starting to rack up the failures.
That being said, though, every time a child rises up to sort of a new academic level, often we see learning differences that were obscured before because the child's coping mechanisms all worked. And then the challenge just got too great, the load, the total things being asked, and suddenly they don't work anymore. Those coping mechanisms don't work. And so I'm a huge fan of educational testing. 3 kids, 3 sets of educational testing. I don't know how you parent. For me, I need data, and I need to know what somebody shouldn't be accelerating in, and then what their strengths are and what they need support around. And so I guess I would always keep thinking there may be something about the way this child's brain likes to learn that's different from their environment and what's being asked of them at this moment.
Hmm.
And let's make sure that there's not especially if it feels mysterious, it's often a learning difference.
Okay, we have a couple more questions to get through here, so I'll try and move through them quickly before we hit the hour. My daughter in 4th grade has huge anxiety and is often exhausted, our writer says. I think it's because it takes so much for her to hold it together. She doesn't want to do much. I want to help her with this without nagging. She's really bright, but is super perfectionist and doesn't like anything with winners or losers. Help. Who wants to take that one? Everybody, Mary's nodding, Mark's nodding.
Yeah, we're all nodding because it's something that we see. The perfectionist strategy is can be really tricky to help manage. I think that we have to, as adults, we have to set some different goals. We've got to make sure that we're careful about the messages that we are sending in terms of achievement, based around grades or what we're doing with the A, and try to change the script more about the goal might be, honey, you've proven that you can do great work. Our focus right now needs to be how you experiencing doing the work. The priority that we are going to focus on is this anxiety that you feel, this getting yourself all ramped up, this concern, the tears, whatever is coming up, and make that start to be part of the goal. That can be especially tricky, and I think one of the reasons why it's so tough is that our kids tie their identities into their achievement. And among the perfectionists that always gets A's, they psychologically start to believe that because when they get A's, we praise them. Of course we do. But what can happen to them is they start thinking, I get praise because I get A's. And if I don't get A's, I'm not going to get praise. Like, you like me because I'm your A student, right? I'm your child that does everything so well, and I get the report card put up on the refrigerator. So I think we have to be really, really careful in the message that we give, that is not why I am so proud of you. You are clearly a great student, but what we need to work on in your academics is really finding a way that you can do this and not feel this level of discomfort. And I always say, for many families, that might mean getting some professional help, getting a counselor, because it can be really tough for parents when that relationship is sort of built, whether we've tried to or not, to hear a different message from us.
And I would just add that I think they also really need to see us as transparent and see our challenges and see to know that we are fallible, right? We're not perfect, and that sometimes we seem like that to students, and to be transparent about the challenges we faced, I think is really important.
Great
I think
point.
also if I just am such a believer in de-emphasizing the grades. Again, if we go back to Coach McCaig, focus on the work at hand, but also joy in the work at hand. And I've had conversations with students where I've said, actually the person who's the happiest wins. That's actually, when you get to be a grown up, that's the person who's the winner, not the person who got A's in school, right? So let's set as a goal having you find more and more joy in each of your subjects. And usually that means that you become more creative and you let go a little bit. And probably we forget as parents that we are 100% the most important and influential people in these kids' lives. And when they're teenagers, it's the same. It's just that they give you one word responses and roll their eyes at you. But it's not any different from when they were little babies and we talked to them, we asked them questions, we talked and talked and talked, and we knew they couldn't answer us, but we knew it mattered that we talked to them, right? It's the same thing. So they hear you, and they hear you anytime you say anything about grades and achievement or other people's grades and achievement or other people who got into Harvard. And so we have to be really, really careful that just the example of this maybe so-called success of our adult life speaks volumes. So we don't have to say another thing. And in fact, I definitely did not look at my kids' report cards after a certain point. Again, because I had kids that were more on that level. If I had kids who had issues with motivation and finishing things, I would definitely be doing it. But I'm just saying, in this kind of a parent situation, joy, happiness, try to be the thing that you care about.
And I do an exercise with parents and students as they kind of enter into senior year and the college process, and that's this kind of hopes and fears exercise, and to get them to really name it and name it for each other. And so what are the expectations? What are the hopes? What are the fears? And on for both students and parents, and then kind of align those and look at what intersects and what doesn't. And then, like Mary said, talk about the role of joy in that, and really identifying your why.
Wonderful. So we are a little bit past the top of the hour. We have two questions that I think would be great ones to finish out on if you guys have another 2 minutes to.
Sure.
Excellent. One I think is a good one to direct at Brennan. Questioner writes, based on my experience with my older son, we feel college apps are screened first based on quantitative data, ACT, SAT, and tossed aside if students miss the magic number. How can my younger son, who has dyslexia, but with many gifts, or dyslexia with many gifts, but low ACT, get his essay and application looked at by universities?
Well, the good news is, I mean, if there's any good news from the pandemic, right, is that that a lot of colleges and universities in this country have gone test optional. So, and they really mean it, that they're test optional. And so that piece of the puzzle, that piece of the kind of the high stakes testing game of college admission is at many schools is on a hiatus, and at some schools it's disappeared altogether. And so I think there's really some opportunity there for, and because of this, schools are focusing more on the other pieces of a student's application. And that could be their, like I said earlier, the kind of the adversity they've experienced and things like that.
Well, it seems like that'll be welcome news for a lot of people to hear. To wrap up, we mentioned the pandemic a couple of times, and I think, Mary, maybe you could touch on the broader relationship between grit and the pandemic, or situations like the pandemic that seem to drag on and are really wearing people down, students and adults alike. I'm reminded a little bit of the Stockdale paradox or other examples of, like prisoners of war who have these psychological strategies for coping with these long-term challenges. How do you see this playing out for students?
Well, I go back to pre-pandemic. We were also worried about the kids being consumed by social media and the shallowness of the online appearance being so overpowering. And, I've been struck by the deepening of the souls of so many students I work with and young adults and my own children, that there are very few people who have not had time to reflect on what matters most to them. And Mark and I have talked about, is this the next greatest generation? Because these students, these kids articulate the importance of home, the importance of family, the importance of community, how much they're going to value live gatherings of people, the importance of their elders and grandparents, and how much they care about keeping them safe. In fact, the kids at school made up stickers and posters that said, "Save Mrs. Wall, wear a mask," because the upper school receptionist is 70. And so they, that I was just floored by what a change in 1 year by these life experiences. And I think, again, our voices are so powerful. If we watch the news and we talk about worrying about things that might happen, and we kind of are gloom and doom, then they will absorb that absolutely from us. But as adults, if we focus on what is fine actually today, and how grateful we are for the Thanksgiving of 3 people we had, because we all picked all the dishes we like, or we focus on, my gosh, I never learned to knit, and now I'm learning to knit, and you have the time to teach me. Those seem like small things, but the ability to find the best in the day you've been given is an incredible level of wisdom. And I think a lot of our kids are getting there. We had what I called prison camp Derryfield, which would be us on campus every day this fall, with incredible health guidelines that we followed based on advice from our public health official consultants who are epidemiologists. Super strict, masks all the time, got to be on this side of the hallway, 6 feet apart at all times, incredible supervision, lots of loss. Seniors who couldn't do any of the activities that they had looked forward to in senior year, for example. But if by constantly talking about how lucky we were to be together when so few schools could be, how much we'd missed each other. Isn't it great that even though we started the soccer season with only skills and drills, we ended playing another school all with masks on? Isn't it amazing we could do that? You know, it's all about just changing the narrative to gratitude and to wonder at what can happen and did happen this very day. And isn't that what makes the difference between adults who are anxious and adults who are fulfilled? It's no, the kids, I think, adapt to it quicker if we model it.
Yeah, well, that's a beautiful way to describe it, and certainly an optimistic and hopeful one too. So I really appreciate that. And speaking of gratitude, I'm grateful to you three, Mark, Brennan, and Mary, for presenting today, and for Derryfield for representing so well this topic. And greatly appreciate it. I know the audience did, based on the feedback that we got and the great questions. So I'd like to thank also the audience for being here. We really appreciate you as well. And hope that you took a lot away tonight. I know that I did. And we wish you well and the happiest of holidays. So thank you very much, and good night, everyone.
Thanks for having us, Ernesto.
Thanks, Ernesto. Thank you, everyone.
Good night. Thanks for watching.